Hello everybody and welcome to Tiger Tales X, a place you'll find stories and fan-fictional crossovers written and read to you guys by myself, Tiger. Today, however, we're diving into one of our partners' crossovers. This story is given to you guys by A Crown, the host of the Author's Crown YouTube channel, another YouTube channel where you'll find more stories and fanfiction crossover, so make sure you check out that channel after you listen to this. This is Soul Slayer, a crossover between Demon Slayer and Soulcalibur. It's a fantastic listen, so stick around, and let's dive in. Soul Slayer.
Not too long after the defeat of Muzan Kibusuji, Tanjiro is walking through the woods near his mountain home. Tanjiro stops along the way, picking up wood to take back home. He hears a familiar voice calling for him. Tanjiro! Kamaboko! He sees his friend and brother in arms, Inosuke Hashibara, running towards him, yelling and waving. As Tanjiro waves to him, his nose picks up a faint trace of an unknown smell. What is that? Even with Inosuke's strong scent, this new aroma still comes through. Tanjiro! You gotta see this sword! I found it so awesome! Inosuke yells. He's fast approaching. Tanjiro replies, A sword? He asks, but before he can say anything else, the always overeager Inosuke barrels into him, knocking both of them to the ground, and they roll across the ground. Umph! They both grunt out as they crash into a tree. Inosuke, you gotta slow down. How many times has this happened? Tanjiro says, pushing Inosuke off and dusting the snow off of him. Inosuke stands up and says, I'm sorry, Tanjiro, but this sword is so weird and cool. You gotta come see it. Okay, let's get back to the cabin. Bring it here, Tanjiro says. Inosuke replies, I already did, but I had to come get you to see it. Tanjiro is quickly grabbed and pulled along as Inosuke runs at a breakneck speed back towards the cabin. Soon the pair arrives back at the cabin. As they enter, they are greeted by Zenitsu, Tanjiro's other best friend, and fellow former Demon Slayer, and Nezuko, Tanjiro's sister and former demon. Nezuko smiles and greets the two, saying, Tanjiro, I see Inosuke caught up with you. Tanjiro, chuckling, rubbing his hair and smiling nervously, says, That's an understatement. Huh? Nezuko says. Tanjiro quickly changes the subject and says, Inosuke, where's this sword you found? Oh yeah, Inosuke says as he runs towards the pile of cloth on the table. Inosuke picks it up and carries it towards Tanjiro. Tanjiro picks up the scent again, and it gets stronger as Inosuke gets closer. Inosuke gets right up next to Inosuke as the smell overwhelms Tanjiro. In his mind, Tanjiro says, the smell is so powerful it covers up every other smell in the room. Is it demonic? But it smells like it has no connection to Kibusuji. Could it be another demon left besides Yujiro? Where did you find it? Tanjiro asks. I found it in town. The merchant was selling it. The guy thought it was a Nichiren sword. What an idiot. Inosuke unwraps it, and Tanjiro is frightened by the huge geometric, almost triangular sword. It looks so weird, and it has a weird-looking eye in the middle. Zenitsu comes in and is visibly haunted by the sword. Inosuke, that thing looks terrifying. You gotta get rid of it. No way! I'm keeping this thing. I'm gonna take it out and use it, Inosuke says as he raises the sword into the air. Nearby, Zenitsu is terrified, and with his face turning blue and eyes solid white before passing out, but Nezuko helps him to his feet and shakes him out of it. Zenitsu's eyes turn into hearts as he drools, saying, Thank you, my sweet, sweet Nezuko. Tanjiro walks towards Inosuke and says, Zenitsu is right. We should take it to the Ubuyashikis. Maybe they could tell us about it. It smells dangerous. We just can't keep it to ourselves. I couldn't agree with you more, a mysterious voice says. They all turn around to see a man standing there in a suit with a matching top hat. Inosuke charges at the man, yelling, "What are you doing here?" The man easily sidesteps Inosuke and trips him, sending the Hashira crashing into the wall. Who are you? Who are you, and what are you doing here? Tanjiro says as Nezuko throws him his sword from its display on the wall, and Zenitsu his. And Inosuke crawls across the floor to grab his swords. None of you understand the danger the weapon you have found possesses. You will give it to me at once, the figure says. Inosuke yells, "Never! You're never going to take it from me. Just who do you think you are? I'm gonna take you down and make you answer me," he says as he runs towards him. Tanjiro runs to stop Inosuke, saying, "Inosuke, wait! This guy may not be the threat." Zenitsu runs towards the pair. The figure looks around and then at the sword. With his mind, he says, "It's been a long time since anyone has tried to challenge me like this." He then looks back at the four others in the cabin and says, "Let me show you the danger the sword will bring to your world." He waves his hand and green energy flows all around, surrounding them all, and in a flash they all vanish.
Hello there, it's me, Usopp, King of the Snipers. If you'd like to hear about my latest adventures with the other Straw Hats, you should go over to One Piece, the audio drama, created by Cosplay Dude 637, and give it a listen. If you want, you could check out the other channels by Cosplay Dude, but we all know you really want to hear about me.
And another flash of green light, they all crash onto the ground, surrounded by grass and trees. Zenitsu is the first to awaken, and he immediately begins to freak out. What? What happened? Where are we? We must be dead. He killed us. What? I was too young to die. Nezuko picks herself up off the ground and gives him a quick smack. Zenitsu goes from freaking out to gushing and says, "Oh, Nezuko, my sweet, at least we're dead together." Tanjiro stands up and says, "I don't think we're dead, Zenitsu, but we're definitely not in the mountains anymore." Inosuke picks up his swords and yells, "Oh, wait until I get that bastard. I'm gonna rip him apart." Inosuke runs off and Tanjiro says, "Inosuke, wait!" and chases after him, followed by Nezuko pulling away and wailing Zenitsu along. Inosuke runs through the woods, but stops when, from behind, Zenitsu says, "Do you hear that? It sounds like swords clashing." The rest of them stop, and Tanjiro, with his keen sense of smell, takes a whiff and says to himself, "I smell something scary. Is it a demon? Someone could be in danger." He starts running towards the source, and Inosuke yells, "Manjiro! Don't you go off fighting without me." I haven't felt this alive in so long. Soon they arrive and see two people fighting, one dressed head to toe like a samurai, the other dressed in some weird clothes and bandages like claw-like weapons attached to his hands. Nezuko says, "Tanjiro, what is that thing?" "I don't know, but we have to help the guy out. He's a fellow swordsman," Tanjiro says as he draws his sword. He charges at the creature and yells, "Inoke Kamigra! Solar Heat Haze!" as he spins himself through with the vertical slash, striking the creature. The samurai steps back and says, "What is this new evil?" Inosuke charges in towards the creature and leaps into the air, swinging his swords and yells, "Beast breathing! Fourth fang, slice, and dice!" and rapidly slashing diagonally multiple times. "A monster! Take this!" the samurai says as he charges towards Tanjiro and Inosuke. Nezuko yells, "Tanjiro, Inosuke, look out!" As she does, Zenitsu, hearing his love worried, takes his charge position and with his hand on his sword and calmly says, "Thunder breathing, first form, thunderclap and flash." The second he is gone, he slashes the samurai sword out of his hands. As the creature Tanjiro and Inosuke were fighting falls to the ground. They look over and Inosuke angrily says, "Hey, what the hell? We were trying to help you," and he tries to push past Tanjiro, who holds him back. "What are you? More monsters in service of Soul Edge?" the samurai asks as he stands in a combative stance. "Do we look like monsters to you, pal?" Inosuke says as the eyes of the mask look off in two separate directions. The samurai picks up his sword and holds it out, and Inosuke laughs. Tanjiro steps forward and says, "Look, we're not monsters, we're human. My name is Tanjiro Kamado, and that girl over there is my sister Nezuko." The guy in yellow is Zenitsu Agatsuma, and here is Inosuke Hashabara. "My name is Hishiro Mitsuguri. I do apologize. The Dark Sword Soul Edge has many serving it or trying to take it for themselves. I myself am simply seeking the strongest warrior to prove myself in combat." Inosuke chuckles and says, "Maybe this guy isn't too bad after all." Tanjiro looks at a nearby village and he says, "I know that village. I've seen it in books, but it isn't around anymore. Guys, I think that weird magic guy sent us back in time." "Back in time? That's just great. He sent us back in time and now we have no way back. We're so dead," Zenitsu says. "But wait a minute. That guy said something before he sent us back," Inosuke says. An image of a stranger repeating the words, "Let me show you the danger this sword could bring your world." A light bulb goes off inside Inosuke's head and he exclaims, "Guys, I got it. The sword, maybe it's the same one from home. If we can't find it, maybe it can help us get back." "Sounds dangerous," Zenitsu stutters out. Tanjiro looks at them and says, "It might be, but we have to try." He then looks over Mitsuguri and says, "Do you think you can help us find the sword you're talking about?" Mitsuguri nods and says, "Our paths have merged for now, as long as you don't get in my way," and he then heads off as the Demon Slayers follow him. As they walk, Tanjiro gets up next to Mitsurugi and asks him, "So this sword, where did it come from? What is it?" Mitsurugi continues, looking forward, as he says, "Long ago it was forged as a simple sword, but was used in many battles by many different users. It developed an evil will of its own. Since then, it continued to drive men to wield it and unleash its power. It has driven many mad with its demonic influence." Tanjiro says, "I have experience with demons. I faced Muzan Kabusuji." "Who?" Mitsurugi asks with a confused look on his face. Tanjiro replies, "Muzan Kabusuji, the first of all demons?" Mitsurugi responds, "Demons come from hell, young one, not from any man." Tanjiro says, "Well, yeah, but he was the first." Mitsurugi interrupts him, saying, "Past foes do not matter. You must ready yourself. These warriors ahead will be alike any other you face." Inosuke chimes in, "I don't care. I'll take down anyone in my way." Mitsurugi says, "You are loud and obnoxious, but I hope for your sake you are right." Inosuke lowly growls as they continue walking. They soon approach a castle, and Mitsurugi draws his sword and says, "Prepare yourselves. I have a feeling one of our opponents is nearby." They all draw their weapons. As they enter the castle, walking through the dark, Zenitsu says, "Guys, I have a bad feeling about this." Nezuko says, "You got this, my love. Just be ready." Zenitsu smiles and nervously says, "Yes, my love, I will." As they enter a darkened throne room, wielded with suits of armor, they all look around, and Tanjiro takes a deep smell and picks up on a strong smell. He yells, "Mitsurugi, get down!" A woman comes leaping out of the shadows, spinning a massive circular blade-like object. Thanks to Tanjiro's warning, Mitsurugi ducks and narrowly avoids a slash from it. The woman flips up over attacks with Inosuke and Tanjiro. She walks back and forth with a slight dance to her step. She looks at Mitsurugi And then at the Slayers, she says,
Miss Rugi, back for more? I see you brought friends this time. Are you scared?
He steps forward with the sword at the ready and says, Tira, I am not afraid of you or your masters. She laughs and says,
Good. Your confidence will make all more fun to play with.
Tanjiro says, We're looking for the sword. Let us pass. We do not want to fight you. Tira looks at Tanjiro and says,
Aw, you don't want to play with me? That's too bad. You are all my new toys.
She charges rapidly, spinning her weapon around it. In Tanjiro's mind, he says, her movements, they're so fast. Control your breathing, watch for the opening. As Tanjiro watches her, Zenitsu in a flash strikes and locks weapons with her. Tanjiro says, Be careful! Zenitsu tells him, I can match her speed. You go, find the sword, I'll catch up. Nezuko says, Zenitsu, are you sure? Yes, my love, I will be back with you soon, Zenitsu replies, and the other run from the room with Nezuko's face showing her worry. Tira, struggling with Zenitsu, says,
All this lovely-dovely is gonna make me barf.
As she makes a throwing up motion, she pulls from the clash and flips backwards, spinning her weapon back to the ready position. Tira laughs and says,
Hopefully you're more fun to play with than that stuck-in-the-mud samurai.
She begins swinging her weapon again, and Zenitsu deflects her attack each time. She comes down with an overhead strike, but Zenitsu parries it and strikes her. She steps back, grabbing the wound, and cries,
Ow, ow, ow. Why would you do that? I'm a girl.
Zenitsu says, What? I am so sorry. Zenitsu enhanced hearing senses her preparing her weapon and narrowly dodged a surprise attack, only taking a slight cut. Tira laughs and says,
Psych. You are so much fun.
As Tanjiro and the others follow Mitsurugi down the hallway, they find what looks like a dungeon. A massive, dark-skinned man with giant axe steps out from the shadows. He growls and says,
You will go no further.
Astaroth, Mitsurugi says, as he readies his sword. Astaroth swings his axe at Mitsurugi, dodges it. Mitsurugi strikes at Astaroth, who blocks it with his axe before attempting a massive overhead strike, which Mitsurugi avoids. The strike hits the floor, making a massive hole. Meanwhile, Zenitsu and Tira trade blows, nearly missing each other with every unblocked strike.
You're so fun. I might keep you here to play with forever,
Tira says as she dances back and forth. These words light a fire in Zenitsu's soul, and he says, Never! I am a spoken for man. I will never leave my beloved Nezuko. For that statement, I will show you no mercy. He bends his knees and puts his sword back in the sheath. He builds up all his energy in his knees and breathes, and sparks begin to flash around him. He closes his eyes and says, Thunder breathing, first form, thunderclap and flash, Godspeed. He flies forward in a huge blue bolt of lightning surrounding him. As Tira raises her weapon to strike, she is struck in the throat by Zenitsu's slash, and Zenitsu slides his sword back into the sheath as Tira falls to the ground. Zenitsu turns to leave, and Tira says,
It's not that easy to take me down. I'm not done playing with you.
She leaps up, grabbing onto Zenitsu and trying to kiss him. Zenitsu can feel her draining his energy, so he quickly throws her off and backs away. She runs away, saying,
Follow me, follow the leader.
Zenitsu says, I told my love I would defeat this one. I can't let her get away. He chases Tira up some stairs. Mitsurugi yells as he trades blows with Astaroth. Mitsurugi steps back, and Inosuke steps on his shoulders with his swords drawn, flying through the air. He yells, Beast breathing, fifth fang, crazy cutting. Inosuke begins wildly swinging his swords in every direction. Astaroth blocks attacks near him with the head of his axe. I'll take this guy on. If Manatsu can take one on by himself, then so can I. Inosuke Hashabara, king of the mountain. Mitsurugi, confused, looks over at Tanjiro, who says, "Trust me, he can handle this. Let's go find that sword." The remaining three run, leaving Astaroth to Inosuke. Astaroth takes his axe in both hands and says,
You have made a brave but foolish mistake, taking me on by yourself.
Inosuke laughs and says, "No mistake here. You're dealing with the king of the mountains." Inosuke tightens his grip and charges, swinging his swords wildly. Astaroth blocks the attacks with his axe and headbutts Inosuke with has no effect. Inosuke laughs and headbutts him back, knocking Astaroth a few steps back. Astaroth swings his axe around in a low circular motion. Inosuke hops over the attack and says, "Beast breathing, second fang, slice!" He slices in an X shape and it hits Astaroth, who falls back. The giant gets back up and swings his axe upwards. Inosuke blocks it, but Astaroth charges Inosuke with a huge shoulder charge. Inosuke is hit dead on and knocked through the nearby wall. Astaroth walks up to the hole and sees the boar-headed man and a piece of wall floating in the moat below. It's his beast head mask lying next to him with the swords. Astaroth leaps out of it and lands on it, facing off with Inosuke again. Inosuke laughs heartily and yells, "Yes! This is what I've been waiting for!" Astaroth looks at Inosuke and says,
You are nothing but a young boy. It is a shame you will spend the greater part of your life in hell.
Inosuke picks up his mask and slams it on his head before picking up his sword and saying, "The only one going to hell is you!" Elsewhere, inside the castle, Tanjiro, Mitsurugi, and Nezuko stop when they hear a loud crash on the floors below. Nezuko turns and says, "I'm going to check on them." She runs off as Tanjiro says, "Nezuko, wait! Be careful!" Nezuko disappears from view, and Tanjiro turns back to continue following Mitsurugi. They arrive in a huge throne room and are met by a pair of opponents. The first one is a ghostly-looking pirate dual-wielding two similar swords, and the second, what looks like huge suit of armor wielding a massive, familiar sword with his eye in the middle. Tanjiro looks at the sword and says, "That's it! That's the sword!" Mitsurugi replies, "That's Cervantes and Nightmare, who at this point are just sentient armors possessed by the evil Malik of the cursed blades." Cervantes laughed and stepped forward saying, "Oh, Mitsurugi, come back for more? Was not the last defeat at my hands not enough for you?" Mitsurugi grips his sword firmly and replies, "This time I'm going to end you once and for all, Cervantes." He charges Cervantes, draws his weapon, and readies it for a coming attack. Nightmare, on the other hand, walks away from the combat and looks at Tanjiro, asking,
Have you come to serve Soul Edge?
Tanjiro says, "No, I need it so I can go home. I'm not from this time." Nightmare responds,
No one will take this blade from me.
He picks the sword off the ground, holding it behind him in a ready position. Tanjiro draws his sword and says, "I don't want to fight you, but I will if I have to." Tanjiro runs at Nightmare and catches the smell of an attack coming from the evil weapon. He jumps over a low swing and a flip over Nightmare. Tanjiro spins rapidly while yelling, "Hinoke Kagura, clear blue sky!" Nightmare takes the attack and falls to the ground. He gets back up as like nothing ever happened. As Tanjiro charges at Nightmare again, Cervantes and Mitsurugi strike each other back and forth, trading blows. Cervantes laughs as he lunges at Mitsurugi. "No new tricks? How boring." Mitsurugi growls and rapidly strikes from multiple directions. Cervantes blocks and strikes Mitsurugi, knocking him back, and then moves towards Mitsurugi, swinging, one sword low and the other in an overhead strike. Mitsurugi barely blocks it. Mitsurugi then bashes Cervantes with the hilt of his sword and grabs him, breaking his guard stance, slicing him back, knocking him to the ground, and slicing him while he's down. Meanwhile, in a higher room of the castle, Zenitsu catches up to Tira, and she readies herself for another fight, saying,
Okay, now for some more playtime.
She runs towards him and cartwheels. While spinning her blade, he draws his sword again and blocks the attack. She gets in his face and kisses his nose, then giggles as she flips backwards. Zenitsu quickly wipes off his nose and saying, "Ah! No one is allowed to kiss me but except for my one true love, Nezuko!" Tira laughs and the face turns sinister as she says,
Maybe I'll just have to hunt her down and take her out too.
Zenitsu's face goes blank as the words echo in his ears. He says inside his mind, "What? Take out my Nezuko?" His face goes from blank to burning with rage. He screams, "No one is going to hurt my Nezuko!" He sheathes his weapon and takes a deep breath, and a lightning begins to build around him. He closes his eyes and says, "Thunder breathing, 7th form, flaming thunder god!" He takes off and rapidly flies around the room, surrounded by the image of a dragon made of lightning. Tira looks around with shock and awe as the lightning fills the room. She tries to ready her weapon, but in a blink of an eye, the dragon flies past her, slashing, and she falls to the ground in pain as Zenitsu is standing behind her. Just outside, Inosuke looks up as he hears the sound of thunder. Astaroth yells,
You should have stayed focused.
as he swings his axe above his head, bringing it down towards the Demon Slayer. Inosuke catches it with his blades, holding it back. As they struggle, Inosuke takes a breath and says, "Beast breathing, 9th fang, extending, bending, slash." As the bones in his arms pop and bend out of place, he goes around the axe and he rapidly slashes Astaroth across the chest. Astaroth stumbles back, grabbing his wound. He roars and charges with his axe, but Inosuke puts his blades on both sides of the axe handle and begins sawing them as he says, "Beast breathing, 6th fang, palisade bite." As the blades saw at it, the axe handle gives and snaps as the head falls to Astaroth's feet. In a rage, Astaroth yells,
How dare you!
Inosuke yells back, "Time to end this!" He charges Astaroth, who slams his heavy foot down on the floating wood, which breaks into splinters. Inosuke, realizing this, leaps into the air towards a ledge of the castle as the wood complete breaks and Astaroth falls into the water. Inosuke looks down as Astaroth doesn't surface. He chuckles in pain and says, "Hey, you weren't as tough as I thought you were," before heading back into the castle, rushing what is most likely some broken ribs. Back in the fight between Mitsurugi and Cervantes, the two warriors trade blows, evenly matched, while Tanjiro struggles to defeat Nightmare. Tanjiro takes a moment paying attention to the smells and control your breathing. Watch for the opening. As he blocks out everything, he smells the kill line opening. He opens his eyes and says, "There it is! Hinoke Kagura! Sun Halo Dragon Head Dance!" As he raises his sword in a high stance, he strikes multiple times, forming a dragon. Each strike hits Nightmare, who falls to the ground. Tanjiro falls to his knees. Out of breath, he says, I did it! But now I've got to help Mitsurugi." As Tanjiro stands up, Nezuko, Zenitsu, and Inosuke run up beside him. They turn towards Mitsurugi and Cervantes. But before they can help him, the ground begins to tumble as the castle shakes. Nightmare, lifeless armor begins to rattle and shake as Soul's Edge hover over into the air. Then everyone look as a bright light erupts from it into Nightmare and a massive flaming being appearing in the Nightmare place. Cervantes laughs and says, "Now you've done it." The flaming being says,
I am Inferno, the true essence of Soul Edge. Now you face my wrath.
The Slayers all look at each other and draw their weapons in to charge it. Inferno, with Soul Edge in his hand, swings it as everything in the room goes bright. The Slayers hear a familiar voice say, "Now you see the true evil this weapon possesses." "What?" Tanjiro says as they all reappear inside Kamado's house. They look around and see the figure from earlier standing there, who says, "Do you understand the danger that weapon could bring your world?" Tanjiro looks over as Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Nezuko stand there. Inosuke picks up Soul Edge and brings it over to Tanjiro. Tanjiro takes it and hands it over to the man and says, "Yes, sir. Will you take this and get rid of it?" The man allows Tanjiro to place a cursed blade in his hands and replies, I may not be able to destroy it, for the blade possesses too much power, but I will make sure no one can find it again, as long as it takes. Tanjiro smiles and asks, You sent us back in time, but how? And why weren't you there? Do not worry yourself with that, child, as you need know is that you saw what you needed to see. Farewell, Tanjiro Kamado and friends. Tanjiro says, Wait, we never got your name. My name is Zas Lamel, and hopefully, young Kamado, we will not cross paths again, the man says as he walks out the door into a snowy mountain wilderness.
This story was written by A Crown and narrated by Billy, the co-host of the Zero to Hero podcast. Make sure you check out both of their channels, of course, Author's Crown and the Zero to Hero podcast, found on all your podcast platforms and YouTube, after you check out the outro. Thank you very much for listening to this story. There are, of course, plenty more where that came from, on this specific channel and on other Tiger channels as well. There are plenty more Tiger Tales channels for you guys to find and explore, with all sorts of storylines, fan fictions to dive into. A huge shout out to the following: Cosplay Dude 637, my Parabatai, and Mark the Red Cornish Ranger. The three of us are the Three Ranger Bros. Then of course we have our partners, A Crown and Cosplay Sun 637, also known as Xander. Of course, a huge shout out to the Zero to Hero podcast, and of course, If You Give a Dad a podcast. If you want to find out more about these people, make sure you check out our website, the3rangerbrosstudios.com. That being said, make sure you check out the Tiger Nexus podcast, my own podcast where I interview people, content creators and geeks alike. Sometimes those two things intertwine. Now, of course, a list of the other Tiger Tales channels can be found on the website, and also some of the channels are down below in the description. Make sure you go give them a listen to, because there's more where that came from. Storytime with Cosplay Dude 637 also returns on a lot of the Tiger Tales channels, including the original Tiger Tales. So make sure you check out his stories as well. I have plenty more content where that came from. I do gaming, reactions, I geek out about stuff, I show off my collectibles, my artwork, and a lot more. Again, some of these links will be in the description down below. If not, you can go check out the website, or check out the TikTok at TiTiger777, where I talk about a lot about my other content. Of course, that being said, I love you all. Make sure you hit that like button, you subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss more stories coming to you from myself and the partners of the channel. We're of passion, everybody, and I shall see you guys real soon.
That before we can...
Don't touch my Pringles.
Bye.